In life, when we have expenses, why do we not look at those expenses as optional? Emotionally, many of us feel as though we have to when it comes to expenses, but feel as though we don't have to when it comes to assets. Have you ever found that some of the choices you are making are literally keeping you stuck in chains? You see, it's interesting because many of us make what I call cheap chain choices. Someone say that with me. Cheap chain choices, right? And I'm gonna explain to you exactly what cheap chain choices are. Cheap chain choices are the decisions, when you're that young guy and you're in the jewelry shop and you wanna buy a chain because you wanna look like you're no longer Mr. Plain, and you look at the chains and you go and buy the cheap chain. And it's not that bad when you buy the cheap chain, but it gets bad when you see that young lady who you want to ask for a date and she looks at you and she looks at the chain and she's like, no way. You see, the thing with cheap chain choices is a lot of time in our life, we don't realize how cheap the decision was to buy that chain until it's too late. And I want to share with you guys from an investment perspective, from a business perspective, from a property perspective, from a lifestyle perspective, not to be the person who makes the cheap chain choices. So you might be sitting there thinking, well, what are the cheap chain choices? I'll give you an example of one of the cheap chain choices. It's when we make the decision to buy anything that is substandard because we think I can't afford it about the thing that we know is our standard. You see, the interesting thing for me is how I actually discovered what I'm sharing with you. So one day I was talking to my daughter and she was talking to me about assets and liabilities. And as we was talking about assets and liabilities, one of the things that dawned on me was this. In the game of Robert Kiyosaki's Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Cash Flow 101, what actually happens is you end up with these red cards, right? Anyone know what the red cards are called? No, they're called doodads. The market cards are blue, right? They're called doodads. And when you pick up the doodads, a doodad generally is an expense, right? So I'm gonna show this to you because I want you to understand exactly how this works. So doodads generally are expenses, okay? Now, I want you guys to do something for me. Share with me a few expenses that happen in life, or if you know the game, a few expenses that might be in the cards. Okay, so I heard dentist. Okay, tennis rackets. All right, cool. A child doesn't show up in a doodad, and I've got 5 children, so I don't like that sounding like a doodad. But come on, give me some more, guys. Give me at least 3 more. Clothes. Electricity. New tires. I'm gonna take both of those. New tires and child's wedding. I heard that one. Now, let me share something with you guys because you guys are really gonna see the cheap chain choices the moment I start to explain this to you. In life, when we have expenses, why do we not look at those expenses as optional? When you pick up the doodad card, in Rich Dad, Poor Dad's Cash Flow 101, and it says, go to the dentist, pay $200, or it says, pay £700, what comes to your mind? Oh, I have to pay this. Why doesn't it come to your mind, I don't have to pay this? Why doesn't it come to your mind, this is optional? Why doesn't it come to your mind, this costs too much, I can't afford it? I'm gonna tell you why it doesn't come to your mind. Because we have been trained by the school system, by mainstream media, by employers and employment industries to not say that about expenses. You've got a gas bill that's gonna come in before the end of this month and you are not gonna say, I can't afford it. You are not gonna say, I don't wanna pay. You are gonna say, oh, unless you've been working harder at building assets than building expenses. Is what I'm saying making sense? Yeah. So whilst I was having this conversation with my beautiful daughter, Abigail, and she was sharing with me about assets and liabilities, what I started to realize is that emotionally, many of us feel as though we have to when it comes to expenses, but feel as though we don't have to when it comes to assets. At the age of 18, I celebrated my 18th birthday in a prison. I was released from prison shortly after, and I made a fundamental decision. Some of you may not know what the word decision means, so I'm gonna break it down for you. To decide is literally a compound word, and D or day as they say in French, in Latin, and those languages, means of. And side means to cut. So basically, to decide is to be cut off from all other options. I went and got a job. My first full-time job when I came out of prison was as an estate agent. Let me tell you why I had that job as my first job when I came out of prison. Because I had to decide that I'm never going back to that place again. I had to decide that my life would never look how it looked again. Here's my question to you. When will you decide that the assets are no longer optional and the doodads will now become optional? Now on this vein, some of you may not know this, but I'm gonna help you even further. D-side also has a few other friends. And their words we actually know, which is why we'd understand what D-side actually means. The first one is homicide. And most people think of homicide as murder, but it's not just murder. It's to cut off someone who is the same as yourself. So this is why homicide means murder, because you're cutting off someone the same as yourself. If you kill an ant, if you kill a fly, animal cruelty guys, don't leave any comments in the video. But if you do kill a fly or kill an ant, that's not homicide, because you haven't cut off the life of someone the same as you. Equally, we have the word suicide, which is to cut off oneself. So suicide, most people understand suicide, but the roots of that word is why suicide is suicide, because you're now cutting off oneself. Does everyone understand this, right? So this is where we get the understanding from the root definition of decide is to cut off all other options. I submit to you that the problem with most people and the reason why many of us have made cheap chain choices is because we haven't decided. There is a fundamental difference between deciding and choosing. Choosing is picking one from multiple options. Deciding is cutting yourself off from all other options. The day I decided to marry my wife in 2012, I had to decide to cut myself off from all other options. The reason why there are men out there who cheat on their spouse, the reason why there are women out there who cheat on their spouse, the reason why there are people who are not making wealth at the level and propensity they desire to make wealth, the reason why people are not investing in property to the degree that they know they can invest in property, I submit to you, is because they haven't decided to decide. So take a moment today and make a decision. What am I gonna do? Am I going to continue to make the cheap chain choices? The things that chain me into the same choices again and again and again, which we can call, for the sake of this video, the doodads? Or am I gonna flip the script and instead of committing to these cheap chain choices, which keep me on the same train, am I going to decide that I'm gonna focus on assets the way most people focus on liabilities, and liabilities the way most people focus on assets? With that being said, guys, if you got value in this video, feel free to leave a comment below so we can know your thoughts. If you wanna get more value like this, feel free to watch another video on the channel. And with all of that said, I want you to remember that small keys open big doors. Good day, God bless, and I look forward to seeing you at the top and not from the top. Take care.